They told me my job was simple. Drive the prince, guard the prince, die for the prince if it came to that. Nobody told me the most dangerous thing I'd ever faced was falling in love with him. Never smiled, never laughed, never said more than he had to. I hated him for the first 3 weeks. Then I made the mistake of looking into his eyes, and I understood some prisons are built without walls.
Kwame Asante was not a man who felt things easily. 3 covert missions in 18 months, 0 casualties, a body built like a fortress, and a mind that moved faster than trouble. He had held guns in the dark, driven through ambushes at full speed, sat across from dangerous men without blinking once. Nothing had prepared him for a photograph. Prince Emeka Ọba-Nwosu, General Obiora said, sliding a folder across the table. 28, third in line to the throne. 2 assassination attempts in 6 months. Kwame opened it and stopped breathing. The man in the photograph was beautiful, in the way that caused problems. Dark luminous skin, cheekbones carved by someone who took their time, eyes warm and intelligent, and carrying the particular sadness of people who smile too much in public and cry nowhere at all. Kwame stared 1 second longer than was professional. Then he shut the folder. You will be his personal driver, the general continued. Close protection, 24/7. Someone inside the palace wants him dead before the coronation. I don't babysit. 2 attempts in 6 months, the general repeated, quietly like a door closing. Kwame opened the folder again. This time, he noticed the prince wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking just past it, at something private, something a little lost, like a man searching for an exit in a room full of people watching him. Kwame recognized that look. He had worn it himself once. When do I start? He asked. You already have. He walked out of that briefing room, telling himself it was just another assignment, a phase, a job. His chest would settle once the work began. He was wrong. He would spend the next 6 months learning that some threats don't carry weapons, some come with warm eyes and a laugh that rearranges everything deep in his chest. Some walk down marble staircases in white agbada and look at you like you are the first solid thing they have touched in years. Some threats. Kwame Asante was about to discover wear crowns, and the man in that photograph, he was going to turn Kwame's entire world outside. Prince Emeka Ọba-Nwosu had been watched his whole life by palace guards, by advisors, by cameras and crowds, and a kingdom that treated his face like public property. He knew how to perform under a gaze. He knew how to stand straight and smile, clean, and give people exactly what they expected. He did not know what to do with Kwame Asante. The man was standing at the base of the staircase that morning like he had grown there, still, watchful, arms relaxed at his sides, dark suit, no expression, eyes that moved across the room, the way a soldier's eye do, measuring exits and threats and angles. Emeka came down the stairs in his white agbada, gold-trimmed, every inch a priest. The man at the bottom didn't flinch, didn't bow quickly, didn't smile. The never smile people always smiled. He just looked at Emeka, steady, unhurried, like he was reading something. Where is Chidi? Emeka asked. Reassigned, Your Highness. The voice was deep, calm. I am Kwame Asante, your new driver. New driver? As if Emeka had simply ordered one from a catalog. I didn't request for a new driver. No, Kwame said. You didn't. Emeka stopped walking. Something about that answer irritated him enormously. Not the words, the stillness behind them. This man was not nervous, not impressed, not performing anything at all. 3 seconds of silence. Kwame opened the car door. Emeka stared at him. Then, got in, because what else was there to do? As the door closed behind him, one word escaped under his breath: rude. Kwame walked around to the driver's seat, started the engine. Difficult, he thought. They drove in silence through the palace gates into the bright Lagos morning. In the rearview mirror, Emeka sat with his jaw tight, watching the city scroll past like a man looking at something he couldn't have. Kwame kept his eyes on the road, on threat assessment, on protocol. Not on the way. The light caught the prince's profile. Not on the belly there sigh Emeka released as the palace walls shrank behind them. Not on the way. Emeka's hand pressed flat against the window, just for a moment, like he was trying to hold on to the outside world before it disappeared. Look at the road, Kwame told himself. He was already failing. A prince without freedom is just a man in a beautiful prison. Emeka knew this better than anyone. The palace was magnificent, carved ebony and Kente silk, golden light pulling through arched windows. Every surface whispering centuries of power, and it was slowly suffocating him. After the second assassination attempt, the king had sealed everything. No public appearances without full escort, no unscheduled movement, no exceptions. So, Emeka sat on his window sill every afternoon and watched the city breathe without him. Kwame watched Emeka quietly, carefully. He catalogued everything: the way the prince's shoulders dropped the moment no one was important watching, the way he read with his whole body, leaning into books like they were offering shelter, the way his laugh was different with the household staff, looser, warmer, like a man briefly allowed to be himself. That was the real one, Kwame noted. That was his actual face. I know you are watching me, Emeka said one afternoon, without turning from the window. That's my job, Your Highness. My job. A short sound that wasn't quite a laugh. My job is to breathe. Do I need your permission for that too? Emeka said nothing. Silence was sometimes the most honest answer. I am a prince, Emeka said, turning. His eyes were fierce now. Quiet grief sharpened into something harder. Not a prisoner. There's a difference, Kwame. The name. No title, just his name. It landed somewhere it wasn't supposed to. There will be a difference, Kwame said quietly. If you're dead, sir. Silence fell between them, like a third person in the room. Emeka stared, really stared, searching for something behind Kwame's careful face. Then he turned back to the window, but he didn't close it. And he had shifted his body slightly toward the room, not toward the city, toward where Kwame stood. As though simply knowing someone was there was enough, as though the loneliness for one afternoon had thinned just a little. Kwame filed that away. Somewhere, he told himself, was professional. Even there, he knew. Even then, he knew that was a lie. The royal garden held Emeka's mother. In every flower she had planted, in the stone fountain she had chosen, in the quality of evening light that had filtered through the royal palms as though she had personally arranged it. Emeka came here when the palace got too loud inside his head, when the weight of everything he was supposed to become made him forget who he actually was. He hadn't expected Kwame to ask, what was she like? The question came quietly, while the fountain ran and the hibiscus burned amber in the dying light. Emeka looked at him. Most people offered condolences or quickly changed the subject. Nobody ever just asked. She laughed too loudly for a queen, Emeka said. My father hated it. I loved it more than anything in the world. Something moved through Kwame's expression. Fast, controlled, but real. A door briefly opening. Do you have family? Back in Ghana. A pause, a flicker of something private. A sister. We don't. It's complicated. Most real things are. Their eyes met, held for a bit too long. Then Kwame looked away, with the quiet discipline of a man who had trained himself not to want things. And the moment passed, but it left something behind, the way fire leaves warmth in a room long after it goes out. We should go inside, Kwame said, standing. It's getting dark. Yes, Emeka said, still watching him. I suppose it is. He wasn't talking about the sky. They both knew it. That night, Kwame sat alone in the security room and stared at the ceiling and admitted to himself in the dark, where there was no one to perform control for it, that whatever was building between him and the prince was not something any protocol was designed to handle. He told himself it would pass. He had never been more wrong about anything. The black Range Rover appeared 3 cars back on a race-slicked highway at 11 p.m. Kwame felt it before he saw it, that cold, clean certainty in the base of his skull that something was wrong. He didn't panic. He never panicked. His hands simply tightened on the wheel by 2 degrees, and his mind went sharp and quiet like a blade being drawn. Unit 2, Black Range Rover, unregistered plate, 3 cars back, on my signal. What's happening? Emeka sat forward. Put your head down, Your Highness. I will not. Head down, now. Something in Kwame's voice, not the volume, not the authority, but the rawness underneath it. Something about almost being desperate made Emeka go silent. Then, slowly, he lowered himself. For the first time since they had met, he simply obeyed. What followed was 90 seconds of controlled chaos, a sharp turn, radio burst, tires screaming on wet asphalt. Kwame's hands were steady, his heartbeat was not. We lost them, he said finally. You are safe. Emeka sat up slowly. His hands were trembling. He stared at the back of Kwame's head, the iron jaw, the controlled exhale of a man who had run every possible outcome and won, and something cracked open in his chest. Thank you, he whispered. Kwame's eyes found him in the rearview mirror. Held for one dangerous second, something unnamed moved between them like a current. Then he looked back at the road. The second moment came at 1 a.m. in the palace kitchen. Emeka sat on the counter eating cold jollof rice straight from the pot, all royal dignity gone, just a tired young man feeding himself in the dark. Kwame appeared in the doorway, off-duty, black t-shirt, entirely human. He looked at the pot. He picked up a spoon. Emeka burst out laughing, real, unguarded, bright as something newly lit, the kind of laugh that had no performance in it at all. Kwame went completely still because that sound did something catastrophic to him, something he already knew he would never recover from. Sit down, Emeka said softly. You don't have to be a soldier at 1 a.m. Kwame sat. The kitchen was warm. The rice was good. And quietly, completely, without any ceremony at all, he came undone. Lady Ada arrived like a poem written for someone else. Elegant, warm, entirely undeserving of the situation, the arranged engagement, the formal smiles, an entire palace full of people pretending this was a love story. She carried herself with the dignity of a woman who already knew the truth and had decided to be gracious about it anyway. In the reception hall, Emeka took her hand from the cameras, said all the right things. His father beamed. And then, for one unguarded second, Emeka's eyes found Kwame standing at the door. The look in them was not the look of a man at his engagement. Kwame turned to stone, stared straight ahead, forced his hands flat and still at his side. Later, in the prince's study, the performance fell apart. I don't want this, Emeka said. Not about the paperwork, not about Ada, but all of it. The throne, the tradition, the entire life written for him before he could hold a pen. Have you ever wanted something you couldn't name? Something that would cost you everything? The room was quiet. They were too close. Yes, Kwame said. Barely a sound. 6 inches of air between them. 6,000 miles of everything. Kwame stepped back, told the prince he needed to rest. Left. The door closed. Emeka stood alone in the amber light, pressing his palm flat against his chest, feeling the ache of a truth that had finally run out of room to hide. The next morning, Ada found him in the garden. She had seen something the previous night. Not a scandal, just a moment, honest and quiet and private between Emeka and Kwame, and she had understood immediately what no one in this palace had dared to name aloud. He looks at you, she said softly, like the world would stop if you weren't in it. She held Emeka's hand gently, said she deserved a man whose face changed when she walked into a room. Then she walked away, with more grace than the situation required. Emeka sat in the garden for a long time. After she left, he already knew what he was going to do. He just didn't know yet what it would cost them both. The rooftop was Emeka's idea. The stars were gods. No city light reached them that high, just the full blaze of the night sky, close enough to feel like a conversation. They lay on reed mats in the warm dark, not touching, faces turned upward, and the night slowly stripped them of everything that wasn't true. My mother used to say, "The heart doesn't ask permission." Emeka said softly. I didn't understand her then. A pause. I do now. The silence that followed had weight, texture, the quality of something about to break. Emeka, the name came out rough, unplanned. Kwame called himself immediately. You said my name, Emeka said quietly, without the title. Kwame said nothing, didn't correct it. Do it again, Emeka whispered. A long, aching pause. Then, Kwame said his name, the way you say something you have been carrying for too long. Emeka. And the prince closed his eyes as though the word itself was something holy. They lay there in the warm dark, close enough to feel each other's warmth, and neither man slept that night. They both knew exactly why. 3 floors below, Kwame's private investigation was tearing itself open. Chief Adeyemi, the king's oldest ally, 40 years in the royal court, and his name was seated inside an encrypted transfer record linked directly to the second assassination attempt. Not a rival faction, not an outsider. Someone who prayed at state functions and smiled over breakfast and had been selling the prince's location to hired killers. If this goes as high as I think, his contact said over the phone. I know what it means, Kwame said, his voice ice. Be careful. If Adeyemi finds out before the festival, nobody touches him. The words came from somewhere much deeper than duty. No one. He ended the call. The security room hummed around him. On his screen, Emeka's profile photo sat open in a secondary tab, the same photograph from the briefing room. The prince looking past the camera at something private. Kwame stared at it. Then he picked up the phone and dialed the king's personal security. The garden at midnight was silver and breathless, moonflowers glowing white, the fountain running like a secret, 2 men standing face to face with everything they had refused to say, pressing the air between them. Tell me it's one-sided. Emeka's voice was stripped bare. No polish, no performance, just a man standing at the absolute edge of himself. Tell me I imagined all of it. Say the words, and I will walk away. I'll be everything this kingdom needs me to be. His eyes searched Kwame's face. But you have to say it. Look at me and say it. The fountain ran. The moonflowers breathed. I can't, Kwame said. The exhale that left Emeka was half relief, half terror. the sound of a door opening that could never be closed. Then, what do we? Emeka, his name cracked open in Kwame's voice. What I feel doesn't change what we are. The council, the faction, Adeyemi's people, they are already watching. They will use this against you. They will take the throne, your father's trust, everything. Emeka reached out, took Kwame's hand, held it. I didn't ask about the kingdom. Kwame looked down at their joined hands, then up at the man in front of him, brilliant, lonely, and fiercely alive, who had pulled a soldier off his post and made him feel again. He did not let go. They talked until the stars faded and the library filled with honey-colored dawn, until Emeka fell asleep mid-sentence against Kwame's shoulder, his last words trailing into silence. Take me with you someday. Kwame sat perfectly still. He looked at the sleeping prince and felt the full terrifying weight of it. Not just one thing, but the specific gravity of someone becoming necessary to your survival. He pressed his lips gently to Mika's hair. I'll take you anywhere you want to go. The festival blazed like a second sun. Thousands packed the royal grounds in brilliant traditional wear, gillies and agbada, indigo and gold, ancient drums, beating in that deep chest-filling rhythm that meant something older than the monarchy itself was being honored. Fire eaters carved light from the dark air. The crowd roared. Underneath all of it, invisible and cold, was the trap. Kwame had laid it 3 days earlier, a counter operation shared only with the king's personal security. He walked into that festival knowing that somewhere in this crowd, Adeyemi's men had come to finish what they had started twice before. He knew their window, he knew their angle. He just had to be faster. On the raised platform, Emeka's voice rolled out over the crowd like a man who had finally decided to be exactly who he was. The kingdom was built on the courage to protect what matters most. Kwame moved through the masses like a shadow, hand near his jacket, every nerve a wire. South entrance, two men in grey. Hold! He breathed. North side, contact, moving. He was already running through the crowd, vaulting the barriers, boots rattling the platform boards. And then his body was in front of Emeka's, arms locked around him. A blade edge caught his shoulder. The concrete rushed up fast. They hit the ground together. Kwame's ears rang. The crowd screamed. He heard his team calling in the arrest. He breathed. Emeka was breathing beneath him. That was everything. Adeyemi's men were seized within minutes. The chief himself was taken from his private box before he could reach an exit. 2 days later, the king stripped 40 years of loyalty from a man who had sold his son's life for political coin. But first, there was the medical wing. Emeka in his dusty festival robes, sitting beside Kwame's bed, hands locked around his, the hand of a man who had been holding on for hours and had absolutely no intention of stopping. Don't, Emeka said, before Kwame could speak. Don't you dare say it was just your job. Kwame looked at him, then he turned his hand over and held on. It wasn't, he said. They tried to take him away, not with weapons, with paperwork, which is how palaces have always done their most surgical damage. A reassignment order, Abuja posting, dressed neatly as a promotion, effective in 48 hours. Kwame accepted it in silence, packed before dawn, told himself that this was the right thing, the only thing, that the best way to protect Emeka now was to remove himself entirely. He was at the palace gate in the early morning mist, bag on his shoulder, back straight, face unreadable, when he heard his name. Not Asante, not Sir, just Kwame. He turned. Emeka stood in the mist in plain clothes, no crown, no ceremony, no performance, just himself, and the look on his face was the one Kwame had spent 6 months trying not to memorize. You were going to leave without a word? His voice was fierce and breaking at words. After everything, it's the right thing. Emeka walked toward him through the grey morning. Don't you dare make that decision for me. I am not a kingdom to be managed. I am not a threat to be neutralized. He stopped close enough for Kwame to see every fractured, furious, tender thing in his face. I am just a man who loves you. Can't you let me do that? Something in Kwame, everything in Kwame finally let go. The bag dropped. Weeks later, the king stood at the royal podium and announced the coronation date, used words that didn't say everything, yet, but pointed toward it, the way dawn points towards noon. Kwame stood, reinstated in his formal uniform, a few steps behind the prince, the world watching, not yet fully understanding what it was seeing. Emeka Emeka stepped to the microphone, looked at it, looked at his kingdom. Then he looked back at Kwame, briefly, wholly. Protecting something you love, he said, his voice steady and unafraid, sometimes means being honest about who you are. I intend to be very honest from now on. That evening, they stood together, in the garden where it had all begun, the fountain, the hibiscus, the moonflowers holding the last golden light. I have loved you since the stairs, Kwame said. Emeka laughed. Liar, you called me difficult. Both things can be true. They held each other properly for the first time. No rows between them, no walls, no distance left to maintain. The world would come for them. They knew it. The world will come for them. They knew this, had looked it in the face, chosen each other anyway, with open eyes and no illusions. Are you ready? Emeka asked. Kwame looked at the man who had pulled a soldier to the rooftop and made him say a name like a prayer, who had reached for his hand in the moonlight garden and said, I didn't ask about the kingdom, who had stood in the morning mist and refused to let him disappear. I have been ready, Kwame said, since the stairs. The fountain sang, the garden glowed, and for the first time in both their lives, they were free. This story is dedicated to every heart that has ever loved quietly in a loud word. You are seen. Thank you for watching to the end. Do well to subscribe, like, and share, and also let me know in the comment section what you think about this story. See you on our next story. Bye.